You know, a dream is like a river, ever changing as it flows. And a dreamer's just a vessel that must follow where it goes, trying to learn from what's behind and never knowing what's in store. Makes each day a constant battle just to stay between the shore. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Maxwell Ivy, known around the world as the Blind Blogger. You can find me at theblindblogger.net. And this is another episode of What's Your Excuse?, where I will help you overcome your excuses by interviewing people who have thrived over adversity or in spite of difficult life circumstances, people who have struck out on their own and started a unique business, people who have actionable advice that's been tested in the world to help you go after and achieve your goals and dreams, and people who I just happen to find interesting, inspiring, or I want to personally talk to that person. So What's Your Excuse is the show. Do hope you will visit my sponsor, Chip Edwards, at createmyvoice.com. You can also find them by saying, Alexa, play Create My Voice, or Google Talk to Create My Voice, or the old-fashioned way, createmyvoice.com. Alexa, stop. See, it's just that easy. It's just that easy. That's all you have to do to get a hold of Chip. And because of that, people can do the same with my website, theblindblogger.net, or my podcast, What's Your Excuse? And these are the kind of things that happen when you do a recorded live podcast. So thank you very much. And I do appreciate Chip and Pam, because without them, I wouldn't be able to do awesome things like go to PodFest and go to MapCon. And so I appreciate them. If you want to talk about being a sponsor, go to theblindblogger.net. So today, my guest is David Goldstein. I met him at PodFest. In fact, we shared a room for 3 days. A little bit about his story. He is a lifelong entrepreneur, grew up in a family that operated or owned grocery stores. And it says here, instead of going to summer camp, he worked in the grocery store. In '83, he started a video store next to one of their grocery stores and ran that for 16 years, I think it is. As a result of the video store, he was able to have a regular segment on a local, on one of the top radio stations in the Philadelphia area, where he would talk about new releases and trends and awards from the movie industry. In 2004, he helped start an online group to help small business owners and sole entrepreneurs with branding through social media advertising, building websites, search engine optimization, and he's still part of that, but now more as a consultant. But the thing he's focusing on nowadays is his podcast, which is called I Can't See, and that's ICANTCU, I Can't See You. And you can find him at ican'tseeyou.com, ICANTCU.com. So David, welcome to What's Your Excuse?
Max, I really appreciate you having me. Thanks for having me today. And I can vouch for Chip, because I've been working with Chip to get my podcast on the A lady and the G lady and whatnot. And so I think, and that's always one of the risks that you take when you say their names out loud. And I just think that's hysterical. And I didn't want to say it, even though I don't have the A lady in the room with me. And but I appreciate being here, and I look forward to what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I look forward to it too. I think it's interesting how you started out in a family of business owners, and you've ended up somewhat of an entrepreneur, if more in a digital way, in a totally probably different way than you started out. But how does first can you give me a timeline of your vision loss, so that I can then ask some fairly intelligent questions about your different businesses along the way,
Okay. Yeah, well, I was born with congenital glaucoma, so I came with a manufacturer's defect, and I had, it's funny with all the pandemic stuff and them talking about New York City. I had around 6 or 8 surgeries at Mount Sinai Hospital up in New York. I've lived my entire life, with the exception of when I was in school down in Miami. I've lived my entire life in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. And so that was at the time the best glaucoma doctor. I had, again, most of my early surgeries, first 6 or 8 of them, were before I was like 3 years old, and they were up there at Mount Sinai Hospital. Um, and then it kind of stabilized for 10 or 12 years, and then I started back on meds, and then I had to have some more surgeries. When I was in middle school and high school. Most of my surgeries have been glaucoma based, but I've had partial cornea transplant. I've had cataract surgery, and most recently, and the most painful, was a detached retina surgery that I had back in 2017, that kind of had me freaked out, because I went to the doctor a couple of days before I was supposed to fly to London. Our daughter was studying abroad in London, and my wife and I, along with our son, we flew over, and we were going to spend about a week in the UK. My son had a friend in the northeast of England, so he was going to go see that person. And my wife and daughter and I were just going to do some things in London. And 2 days before I was supposed to fly, I was diagnosed with this detached retina, and the doctor kind of freaked me out by saying, "Oh, you should have this tomorrow." I said, "No, okay, I could have it tomorrow, and then I'll fly on the day after." He's like, "Oh no, you can't do anything for like 6 to 8 weeks." So I said, "Well, then it's going to have to wait." I said, "Is that going to be okay?" And every morning when I opened my when I opened my eyes in London, I thought, okay, good, I could see, or oh, it's still there. And again, I don't have, I have a little bit of vision, so I certainly didn't want to lose that bit. Um, but I then came back. I got off the plane at JFK at like 9:30 at night. My phone had all these messages on once I turned it on, and my surgery was scheduled for first thing the next morning in Philadelphia. So we drove home. I got home and got a couple of hours sleep, and then went for the surgery. But the surgery was painful, and I don't know what the reasoning was for that. And I don't know if you've had eye surgery lately. Most of my last, and I've had 17 or 18 surgeries over my life. Most of the last, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 of them, I'm awake, and the doctor is talking to me and asking me questions, and you're kind of drowsy. But the last one, I could feel him cutting into my eye, and I could feel all that, and I'm moaning, and they're talking about Batman, which had just come out, and cribs from IKEA, and I'm like, oh my God. And some of the things they were saying were funny, and I kind of chuckled, but most of the time I'm like, oh.
I would rather get focus on me, please.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just kind of funny. And, again, I see the eye that the surgery was on was the one that I see out of. I'm, blind in the one eye, and I've got a little bit of vision in the other. So I couldn't see, who all the folks were in there. And when the nurse said it was over, I said, "Oh, thank God, that was the most painful thing I've ever gone through." And then the recovery from that, and you don't have to be visually impaired to know, if you've had a detached retina, you have this like bubble in your eye that you have to lay a certain way, and you've got bed rest for like 22 hours a day, for about a week. And that might have been just as painful. And it was, I had to lay on my side, and oh my God, that was the worst. But hopefully they're behind me. I mean, let's face it, I don't believe that, because, as anybody that has a little bit of vision, they'll do just about anything to save that little bit of vision. And, if that's what I have to go through again to save what I've got left, I'll do it. And, but yeah, that was the painful one. So along the way, when I was after my surgery, the last glaucoma surgery I had when I was in high school, it was like 1980. I was in 10th grade. It was May 20th. And from that day until for the next 20 or so years, 25 years, I didn't have another surgery. I had a good long run of just managing with medicine and things like that.
And what was your visual acuity during that run
from that
high school
time,
until over that 25-year
it was
period?
in the eye that could see, it was around 20/60, so it was borderline that I could drive. and I actually did drive a daylight driving only. I actually did drive unless someone else who could drive was in the car, because it was just dumb for me to be the driver. Um, to do that. And so I did drive, I drove, when I had my video store business, it was about a mile down the street. I drove to that. It was not a big deal. It was the problems arose, when I would lose track of time in the fall and winter, and it would get dark. It would get dark earlier. So, I'd look out the window and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's almost nighttime. I've got to drive home. What am I going to do? And sometimes I'd have a friend come over. Other times, because it was a pretty straight road, I did manage, and I, knock wood at the time, and didn't hit anything or anyone. Um, so for the best that I ever saw was around 2060.
All right.
And from the time I had the video store on, it started to deteriorate, but a little bit here and there, until around 2005 or so, 2003.
Right.
So
Okay. So with 2060, I'm guessing that operating a video store with hundreds or thousands of titles was probably still not easy. So what were some of the things that you came up with to help you manage it?
yeah, well, the way we originally were, we thought we would do it. We used a labeling gun. You've seen them. Well,
Yeah,
maybe
they're
some of the
okay.
folks,
They
like
okay. Okay. Basically, what they are is you have a tape labeler that will. Everybody's seen them where they'll print letters on tape that you peel off and stick on stuff. Well, they make a labeler that will either generate raised tactile letters and numbers, or that will generate Braille characters. And mine has Braille characters on it, but I haven't used it in forever because a lot of smartphone apps are now doing stuff that I used to need the labeler for. But your original
oh no,
plan was
this was even further back than that. This was basically a grocery store labeling gun, that my dad, in his stores, they would use to price things. You could put like a 6 or 7 digit code at the top and a smaller font, and then a price, in a larger font. That's how far I'm going back. So I know some of
okay.
the
All right.
audience might
Yeah.
not even remember those days, since now nothing is priced. You just take it up to the scanner and you swipe the barcode on it. So it was one of those. But when we opened that, I quickly noticed that for me to do that, and unfortunately that was very easy, because anybody in the store was able to grab the gun. If the label was a little damaged, they could just grab the gun, punch the numbers in, and hit the the spine of the tape.
Right.
So one of the things that I did, and again, we opened in 1986. So one of the things, we didn't have any kind of barcode scanner. That wasn't a thing yet for us. In fact, we never actually had one there by the time we had closed in 1999. I got the address labels, the return address labels, and there's like 80 to a sheet of them. And so when we had new releases coming out, what I would do, I would go into the office, and I had a list of everything that we were getting, and I just print the labels. Okay, we have 24 copies of Saving Private Ryan coming in, so let me do basically our coding system was a 5-digit code, and then a hyphen, and then 1 through 24. So I would do that, and so I'd print the sheets of labels out, and then when they came in, either the store manager or one of the other employees would process the order and punch them in. And it would also have, in a smaller font, it didn't matter to me, but in a smaller font, it said the day that we got the tape in. And that was important, not for when we originally got the tape in. That was important if, one of the tapes, sometimes they came, they went bad, or they came in defective. So when we got a replacement, we'd put that same number on it, but then put the updated date on it. So we knew, okay, this one's a replacement, and we got it this day. So we knew how many times it potentially could have turned, to know if we made money. So that was one of the things. And I have to tell you, the other thing, I've been fortunate, maybe now, not that I'm 55 years old and starting to get starting to get that little bit of forgetfulness, but I've had a great memory. So when a customer would come in, And I've used that. That's been my saving grace through my life, is to, the memory that I've had. I remember dates. I told you the date of that, my
Right.
first trabeculectomy back in 1980. Um, you know, I remember. So a customer would come in. If they came in enough, I would remember their number. I might not be able to see their face or recognize them, but if they said, I'd say, "Hey, how you doing?" If I was helping them, do you have your card? And he said, "No, you always know who I am." I said, "Oh, what's your last name?" And they would say their last name. And the number protocol for our store was, it was the first three letters of their last name, and then a triple, 3-digit code, and then our store number, which was 1062. So, I would remember, oh yeah, that's LAR 008 1062. If this person named La Rosa would come in, um, and so I would, now him I would know because his grandson worked for us, and he was a customer from day one. So, but that was another saving thing for me. If I didn't have a good memory, I don't know what I would have done with that, because those were handwritten. They were set up where when a person signed up, we would handwrite those cards.
I just realized two things I want to ask you about. One is, when you logged in, did you turn your video on?
I did.
Okay. All right. Second thing is, we've all had this conversation with people about, when you lose your vision, does your hearing get better? Does your sense of smell get better? But nothing. No. But here's one that nobody ever talks to me about. And it's something just occurred to me this minute as you were talking. I'm thinking, as a blind person, up until I got a good computer, my memory was really, really good too, because I didn't have a choice. It had to be really good. And it seems to me, if I remember right, that we had exercises in school or in our special education classes, in my case, where we were actually helped to learn how to remember things and how to grow our memory. So, um, you know, I'm surprised more people don't ask blind people, is your memory better because you can't see? And I'm just wondering, if you want to talk a little bit about that, because it just occurred to me as you were talking.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because my wife will put something down on the floor and she'll say, "Don't forget, the laundry basket is right here." And then of course I'll forget, and I'll either stub my toe on it or stumble over it. And now we know that, my wife and kids both, they all know, hey, just put that back where you got it from if it's in the fridge, because I know the blueberries are on the top shelf all the way to the left. And it is, the worst thing I could hear when I first went into a class. I remember this so specifically. I went into my social studies class in 10th grade, and the teacher said, and I love this guy, we all love this guy, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, you're not going to have to remember dates." I'm like, "Well, there goes my A for this class," because I knew that if I didn't have to remember dates, I'm going to have to remember something that, because I'm great with dates. Again, maybe not now as much, but over the course of my life, I have been, a date was something that was easy for me. And even now, we play Jeopardy every day on the A Lady. And, there was a question a day or two ago about a date. And, my daughter said, "How'd you know that?" I said, "Jane," I said, "if there's one thing I know, it's dates." And that's, it just, and it is. And when you don't have your site, you have to remember, because I would never find anything again if I didn't okay, that was right over there, it's over there, and I know it's halfway back in this drawer. So I know that when I need to do something, I can go to that drawer halfway back on the left hand side. I can grab what I need, and that's where it always is. And then I know when somebody's used it and it's not halfway back, it's all the way back, or it's right at the front. I know. And it gets frustrating. And again, now that getting a little older, and also with the use of phones like our smartphone, where you just have to tap somebody's name and you can dial them, sometimes I'm like, "Ooh, what was their phone number again?" I want to dial on the landline because my phone is dead or whatever. And then I have to take a minute to think about what their phone number is, because I haven't actually punched in those numbers in a decade.
Yeah. Yep. But I am surprised that blind people don't get asked about that subject more often than being asked about sense of smell or hearing. But I think you're probably on the right track. We develop memory because we have to, and then like everything else, as we get older, we have a little more trouble with it. One of my favorite local radio guys. He's now on TV. Is a sports guy named Charlie Palillo, and he's well known for saying "Father Time is undefeated."
He's
And
right.
basically, what he means is that at some point in your athletic career, you're going to lose a step or two, and eventually, you're going to have to admit that you aren't the same guy you used to be. So, but I've recently, read posts or read articles about neuroplasticity and how part of what happens with blind people is because the brain is remapping itself, and it's taking the computer power it would have used for all that visual input, and it's applying it to memory, smell, taste, tactile input, and that sort of thing. And I can kind of see that, especially because a lot of it is backed up with like MRI results and brain scans.
Okay.
So but it's one of those topics that I don't know about you, but I always have to be prepared for that answer, because it's just a matter of time before the next person going to ask me that question. And now along the line of blindness and vision loss, I want to talk about something that me and you recently experienced together. And it's one of those things you really can't experience until you're in a place with other blind people with different levels of vision loss. It's until we went to Podfest, I had either never experienced this, or it had been so long since I had experienced it, I'd forgotten about it. For those of y'all who obviously weren't there, for most of Podfest, I was following David around Sighted Guide, or I was listening to his cane taps and I was following him that way, because he does have more vision than I do. And there were some people who reacted to you that week as if you may have been posing and maybe didn't have vision loss because you had so much better cane skills than I do, and because you have a lot more vision than I do. And I just think maybe we should talk a little bit about the various levels of vision loss and the way the world treats us based on how we use what vision we do have.
Right. I mean, that's a thing that I think folks with sight just don't get. They see somebody with a white cane and they think, okay, he doesn't have any sight. It's not an all or nothing. And it's 92% of the people that use a white cane have some sort of vision. Most of them, if not all of them, are legally blind. And my vision is around 20/300 in my eye that still has sight. That is 2400, for folks that don't know, is the big E. If you've ever done an eye test, that's the 2400 line. The 2200 line usually has 2 letters. I know on most of the ones that the offices that I'm in, and again, with my good memory, I would sit down in the chair and they say, "What line can you read?" I said, "What line do I know, or what line can I read?" Because I could, I had them memorized down to the 2060 line, because I was, for the longest time, it was like, I don't know if it is a film strip. I don't know. Now they're getting a little bit more creative and they could change them. But DA06 was the 2060 line on those old visual measurement things. So the SL was the 2200 line on the on the current ones that most of my ophthalmologists use. And it's funny, you talk about that, and I've got a regular ophthalmologist, I've got a glaucoma specialist, I've got a cornea specialist, and a retina specialist, and everyone has done surgery on me, except for the regular guy who's just local. And none of them get, and I just find it incredible. As my sight was deteriorating, my local guy, I said, what do I do? I said, it got to the point where when I was at the video store, I remember one day I was reading one of the trade magazines, but I was working the counter, but I was off to the side. Two other employees were on. And at a certain time of day, we had a third person come in. During the day, it's pretty slow. It was a pretty slow thing. So there was usually me and just another employee. It might have been a manager. It might have been just another employee. But at a certain time in the day, it got busier. So we brought in another person to cover the floor. And I remember I was reading a trade mag and I was reading an article, and I had it pressed right up against my face with the glasses that I wore at the time, which were very thick, of course. And a guy started laughing at me, and he's like, and my wife happened to come in at that time, or maybe my wife was working, I don't remember. And my wife said, "What's so funny? Oh, look at how he's reading that paper." And my wife starts getting into it with him. What do you think that's funny? Yeah, I do. I think it's hilarious. Look at how he blah 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 blah. And and so that's just one thing. And as I've lost my sight, you learn to figure out, and sometimes you learn it on your own, and sometimes other folks who are blind, tell you. I was at an event. One thing that I can see very plain as day is glare, whether it's a light or watching hockey on TV. It's just I actually don't watch it anymore because the glare it just kills me. If I want to listen, I'll put it on the radio or on on one of the smart speakers. But I was at a train station once, and we were doing an event. I'm a member of the National Federation of the Blind, and we were doing an event at this train station in Center City, Philadelphia. And I said to the guy I was with, I said, "Tom, do you know where the bathroom is?" He's like, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Let me take you." I said, "Well, why don't you tell me where it is so I could find it on my own? Because I'm pretty good. Once you tell me where something is and I walk it and I do it on my own, I pretty much know, just like at the hotel in Orlando, once I had a go round of somebody either showing me or figuring out on my own, I was pretty comfortable with going. I mean, I made, you always make some mistakes. I know I haven't done it yet, but I know one day I'm going to walk into the ladies' room. And don't worry, ladies, but, I won't see anything. It's fine. Uh, but, he said, "Okay, do you see the lights up above? Do you have enough sight to see them?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "It was great because the ceiling was black and the lights were round." He said, "The lights that are round are in rows above the walkways where you can walk. Where there's no lights, there's either a ticket booth or a sign or stairs. So just follow the lights all the way down. When you get to the last row of perpendicular lights, hang a right and then walk down, and then you'll get to another row of lights, make a left, and the bathroom will be right in front of you." And sure enough, I found it. And so I use that a lot. Yeah, you have to, just like you were saying earlier, there's all sorts of things that you have to do, whether it's tapping with the cane or in Orlando. I knew that when I walked out of the Starbucks and we were heading to, the rooms downstairs, I knew I made a right out of Starbucks. I walked straight, and I would walk until I either figured out I could hear the escalators, or if I walked, I didn't hear the escalators, but I walked far enough, there was a breeze that was like a headwind. So I knew if I felt that breeze coming from my right, I knew that's where I had to make the right to go down the escalators. And, and then, I figured it out from there. So it's just little things like that to get around that I use that makes it, that just, I'm pretty adventurous, and now I don't know how long it'll be until I travel again by plane, because the way things are now, I certainly don't want to be stuck on a plane with somebody that may or may not be sick. But that was the first time going to Orlando, was the first time I had traveled on my own since I had learned to use got the mobility training with my cane. I had looked into a business back in, I want to say it was 2001. In January of 2001, I had gone to Miami, and my vision was not terrible. I mean, yeah, it was terrible. It was probably 20 over 100. So to find
Yeah.
my way around that airport was, was pretty tough. I had done that on my own. We were looking to buy a business, and I was supposed to go with a guy who was going to be my partner in this business, and he backed out at the last minute. And I said, "You know what? Screw it. I'm still going to go." And I went down there, and it was rough. It was difficult. I went around this event, and I went on my own. So because I didn't use the cane, and that's one thing. People see the cane and they know that you can't see. When I was walking around, I'll never forget, right before I started to have mobility training, my wife and I were at the movies, and I ran into a woman. I think we were probably both walking full speed, And I'm like, oh my God, I could have knocked that lady down. What if it was an older person? I could have hurt them. And, you know, it was then that I knew that, hey, it's probably time that that I do the mobility training. At least if I, if I don't see somebody coming, they're going to see me coming. And, and then, a few months later, I had another surgery, and, my vision at that point didn't recover above being legally blind. And, then I got the services to learn how to use the cane and to do some other things. And, um, everybody has different ways of doing things. And, it's just a matter, would it have taken us, a lot longer to check into the event if, the person, that checked, for example, that checked me in, if they didn't tell me, a couple of things, or then the person that said, oh, well, you'll get your map, and I asked him a question about the map. He said, oh yeah, it's right there on the map. And I held up my cane and I said, is it right there? And he's like, yeah, it's right there. You'll be able to read it. I said, okay. And I didn't go into it with them. And, I let it go at that point, figuring that when I got back to the room, or when I got to a quiet space, I could use my phone and try and figure it out. Yeah, but mobility to me is so important. And before we had moved, we lived in a very nice development with nice houses. That walking around the development was easy, but going anywhere else was almost impossible. The main road to get to a public transport stop, whether it's a bus or a trolley, there were no sidewalks. There was, the white line that, one side of the white line you're on the road, one side of the white line you're not, and the side that you weren't on the road, but like on the shoulder, the quote unquote shoulder, it was only maybe a foot wide, and there was a hill going up from there, so you really couldn't walk on the grass. And it was so harrowing. I hated doing it. I was always terrified that I was going to walk in the street and get hit. But now we live in a place where I can walk to a train, and there's a bus that comes right in front, and I can take the bus to a trolley, or if I needed to, the bus to a train, or if I really needed to, an Uber to a train if I had luggage. So it's so much easier now. And I'm in walking distance, a 5-minute walk to a drugstore, and a little cafe that also has a little market. So to get around now, it's very easy, to get things that I need. And sure, when I get into the store, it's a different story, and I've got to pull out my phone and have either use Ira or use one of the other apps, Seeing AI or Envision, to tell me, if I go for a lemon, I need to know, get the phone out to try. And, if it's slow, the person will come from behind the counter and say, oh, what do you need? I said, looking for lemons. Once I find the lemons, then I can go through and find them, and I'm good. But yeah, I mean, getting around being independent is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, well, on your business trip, when you went before you had that last surgery, I liked how you just said, well, screw it, I'm going to go anyway. But I was really impressed with the way the fact that you arrived in Orlando at least a day earlier than the event started. And so you had that time to orient yourself to the hotel. But
I actually didn't get to that hotel until the morning of VidFest. I had to stay. VidFest started at 9 in the morning on Thursday, so I actually flew in on Wednesday, and I had to stay at a different hotel. They didn't have any rooms at that hotel. So, and that was, talking about being brave and going out and looking around. There were things that were fairly close to that other hotel. I think it was called Delta something. I ended up just staying at that hotel and eating in the hotel because things seemed like they were close, but they were near highways, and I just didn't want a chance going out. But when I did check into the hotel on that Thursday before VidFest started, I made sure I got there early enough to check in and to kind of get a lay of the land, and walk around just on my own. And that sometimes that's what it takes. It takes a couple of mistakes. Hopefully the mistake isn't, walking into a fountain or, or whatever. But
yeah.
I was able to get a lay of the land that Thursday morning before the event started at 9.
Yeah, and I think what you just did there was you explained to people that whether it's blindness or whether it's some other consideration, that we don't have to address a problem or an obstacle the same way all the time. There can be times when the best answer is to sit in the hotel and order room service or go down to the hotel coffee shop. Um, or there's times when it's I get my white cane and walk around till I figure out where stuff is. And I think that whether you're sighted or blind, a lot of times the problem is you try to apply one approach to all situations, even when that same approach isn't going to work in all situations.
Right. That's, that's so true. Uh, going there or going, let's say, someplace in a city, like, we go to New York a lot. My daughter lives up there, and I had gone there on my own in the beginning of January for her birthday when she was working. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go and get off the train. And geez, I get off the train so early before she gets done work. What am I going to do? Oh, look, B&H Photo and Videos right around the corner from the train station. Let me see if I could find that. And I did. I found that. And then I walked over to another place that I was familiar with. But again, there's just different ways. And same thing in the airports even. When I was leaving to go to Orlando, I got out of the Uber and I walked into the airport, and I got in the wrong line at the first bit, and then I got into something that wasn't even a line, and they say, "Oh no, we're just chaperones for these kids going to Florida." I said, "Well, do you know where the line is for the?" And they, of course, the first thing is, "Yeah, it's right over there," and of course they were probably pointing. Um, so, I got through security, and the TSA agent said, "Do you know where you're going?" I said, "No, I have no idea where I'm going. In fact, I don't even remember what gate I have to go to," which is very unlike me. Back in the day when I was a kid, I would have said, "Yeah, I'm going to gate E5, and I'm going to go 7 steps this way. I'm going to walk that way, and then down that way." I had no idea where I was going. I just knew I walked out of the security at PHL, and I saw a group of people. Close by, and what looked to be video monitors that may or may not have had, flight schedules. And I just walked over and I just started, I said, "Excuse me, could you tell me where, I'm going on Spirit Air, whatever the flight number was. Do you see, if does that have a gate up there?" Oh, and one guy said, "Oh yeah, Spirit is gates E3 and E5." And I said, "Okay, left or right?" And he said, "Left, and it'll be the first concourse on your right." I said, "Okay, great." Well, I started walking, and what I love to do both in the airport, or when I was in New York, I did this. I got behind somebody who was dragging a suitcase, with the wheels, and it was some sort of tile floor. So I hear thump, 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 thump. And the guy was walking in a pretty good clip for me, and I was happy to walk. I just walked behind him, and I was hoping he was going to E. And once he made the turn to go to, Concourse E, I followed him. I didn't expect him to be on my flight. In fact, he peeled off and went into a restaurant. Um, Once I figured out that the evens were on one side and the odds were on the other, I went to the odd side, and I just in my head, I said, okay, this has to be E3, and it didn't seem like a lot of people were there. So I went to what I thought was E5, and again, I heard people talking, and there was a crowd around. I said, is this gate E5? Is this the flight to Orlando? And the person I asked said, yeah, and I was good. And I did the same thing in New York. And in New York, it's a lot easier because to find a restaurant, there's not a lot you need to do, obviously. There are thousands of restaurants. So, looking for a place to go to eat or whatever, when you don't have sight, you have to figure out what you want. And, you probably only have to walk a couple of blocks, no matter what you want, and you'll find it. So it's a lot easier in a city than in Orlando, where that hotel was. It wasn't really near anything. And even the first night hotel that I stayed at on that Wednesday night, it was close. And, like I said, I would have felt funny calling an Uber to go a mile away when I normally would walk that, but I didn't know, I knew there was a highway close by, and I didn't want to have to cross any kind of highway, and I wasn't 100%. So, I let it go. And that's, following people, whether it's footsteps or a suitcase, that's something that, that's a technique that I use a lot, because it's just very helpful. And if I can find somebody who's walking the same speed that I like to walk, even better. So, it's, again, just
Yeah,
a way of working with what you have.
right. Yeah, and Again, this is the What's Your Excuse show. You can find me at theblindblogger.net. My guest, David Goldstein, you can find him and his podcast at ican'tseeyou.com, ICANTCU.com. One of the things that I finally did a few years ago when I started traveling by plane more than train is I just decided that I'm going to accept all the help that they will give me at the airports, to the point I now check in at the curb. I accept a wheelchair. I let them take care of the luggage, and I basically just concentrate on listening for my flight and waiting for them to take me onto the airplane. So,
Okay.
so my approach is much different than yours, but they work for both of us because of, you know, the differing vision levels and also just our differing approach to life in general, you know, so.
Right. And you know, like I said, everybody is a little bit different. You know, one of the things that that I said to my wife, I said, you know, I was talking, you know, about the differences, you and I mean, you at Podfest were dressed very nicely every day in a suit, and I had a black T-shirt on and jeans, or a black long sleeve shirt and jeans, and when I got cold, I put on a, you know, a flannel shirt, without tucking it in also. So so
Yeah, but
you know,
but we
it's
had
a,
we yeah, but we had totally different missions. You were there to enjoy the event, network, and soak up information. I was there. I had a speaking part, and I also had to represent my brand, and part of my brand is, and I think you'll appreciate this. One of the reasons why I dress as well as I did at Podfest was because I think it dispels a myth that some sighted people still have, and that is that blind people cannot be expected to dress well. You know,
yeah,
so.
and that's, you know, along those lines. Last year, about a year ago, I did some training. One of the things I do here in Pennsylvania, I am a NFB Newsline outreach coordinator in the state, and when I was doing training for that, uh, we didn't have to dress this way, but I noticed everyone, down in Baltimore at NFB headquarters, they were all dressed in, you know, suit and tie. And I remember remarking to the person who was training us, the director of NFB Newsline, he was saying, yeah, you know, President Riccobono wants everyone, you know, we're here in business, we're doing business. He wants people to see that blind folks can be in business. And I just think it helps. I was listening to another podcast, a business related podcast, not blindness related. And the guy was saying, you know, how important it is to, you know, and he was talking about spending a lot of money on clothes. I mean,
Well,
crazy
that's
amount of
not
money.
necessary. That's not
Right,
necessary.
right, exactly. But the fact that when you go in and ask for, you ask you ask someone to trust you with either their brand or to create their brand, you have to look like you mean business. You can't go in like I always look, with a T-shirt on, a black T-shirt. And today I have to tell you, I am wearing your T-shirt. Um,
I
so,
appreciate that. I
so
appreciate that. You know, I consider that a good investment. Yeah, Zuckerberg, for some reason, can get away with the black, what is it, hoodie or sweatshirt or whatever it is he
right,
wears. But for the most part, if you're asking people to spend thousands of dollars, much less millions of dollars, they expect a certain image.
right,
You know.
right.
So before I forget about this, let's talk a little bit about I Can't See You, your podcast, and your growing brand, and tell people what they can expect on your show and what you're trying to do.
One of the things that that I do here in the Philadelphia area is I help a company called Philly Touch Tours. They do training at one of their components is training at museums and gardens in the area, that allow for tactile days where someone who's blind or visually impaired can go in and, for example, the Penn Museum is one of their clients, and it is just so cool to go in there and touch the hieroglyphics on these different things that are, in some instances, are over 4,000 years old. So we train,
Wow.
if you're sighted, that's the, I can't imagine a kid watching, a few blind folks touch some of these old things and a kid wanting to go over and touch them. No, you can see, you have to look at it. Um, so we train the staff on how you can treat a blind or visually impaired person to make their time there at the museum the most enjoyable for them, whether it's allowing them to touch if you can. I mean, in some instances you can't, but we did a training at the Academy of Natural Sciences where stuff is behind glass, and so you can't touch it. But along the way, they now take, if they're showing a picture, if there's like a stuffed whatever kind of animal, they may have a sample of the skin of that animal in a box with them, or the horn of that animal, and things like that. And they know how to describe it, and they know that, it's okay to say "see you later" to a blind guy. And that's kind of what, when I started the podcast, that's kind of, what I want is for sighted people to see that, hey, we can do things just like you for the most part. I mean, listen, we're not going to, step into a cockpit and fly a plane or drive a car, but to show that, hey, we can do this stuff, and it's something that you shouldn't underestimate us. And don't be afraid to ask us if we need help, but for God's sakes, don't just grab our canes and treat us like a Mylar balloon, and drag us around. It's kind of to show folks also, here's how you can, if you see somebody that's, blind or visually impaired, here's how you can help them when you're out and about. Don't grab them. They can, you can ask them, do you want me to help you across? Do you want to grab my arm? Should I grab yours? Whatever's more comfortable. And that's what the podcast is. It's basically about what I go through on a fairly daily basis. I mean, obviously now that we're all, shelter in place, basically, there's not a whole lot going on. I came across a new way to play Clue that I played with my wife and daughter the other day, and that's a little more difficult to play as someone that can't see, because there's cards that you don't want the other people to see, and so forth and so on. So that you kind of have to have a workaround. Last night we played Monopoly. Monopoly is a different story. All the cards are out in the open, and everybody can read the stuff, and so forth. But so that's what I talk about on my podcast, different things that have happened to me, different things that I've tried. And I'm in a fantasy football league that the Blind Abilities podcast has. And so last year, and I think I ruined his season because he was doing great. It looked like he was going to make the playoffs, and I said, "You're good to go. You're in." And then he lost that weekend, and he didn't make it, and that was the end. And actually, he is a guy from Houston, so so we text every once in a while when something good happens for his Texans or for my Eagles. We'll go back and forth with a little thing. And that's basically just to show folks with sight, hey, we're humans. It's not an all or nothing. When you see a guy with a white cane and sunglasses on, there may be some vision there, and there may be some useful vision. I can't, I can't read a sign, but I can certainly pull my phone out and have it read to me. And there's just workarounds. I think just about any visually impaired person that uses their iPhone for help has a love-hate relationship with that. When it works and it works well, it's great. But sometimes, like every time I start a podcast, it will tell me over and over and over what the name of the podcast is and what episode it is. Meanwhile, the podcast guest or host is talking, and so they're both talking at the same time. And so I mean, there are, that's where I talk about stuff like that on my podcast, and things that you can do. And sometimes I talked to someone in my most recent episode that I actually met at Podfest from a company called VertForce. And VertForce is basically an employment service that helps connect military spouses with virtual jobs, so they can work remotely, because they're constantly moving about as their spouses get get shipped around the country and around the world, if you get one of these virtual jobs, whether it's as an executive assistant or whatever, you can still keep that job, whether you're working in the US or, in the Mideast or Japan or wherever. And they actually have a partnership with IRA that helps them, um, you know, gain, IRA. I don't know if you've ever used IRA, but they have
Yeah.
trained staff. Their staff is trained, so a little more trustworthy than showing your financial records to somebody from one of the other places, because at least these people are trained. IRA kind of backs them, and unfortunately I've heard IRA had a little bit of an issue. So hopefully they make it through, because I think it's a service that is very helpful. I know it's helped me out in a few pinches, and but it's stuff like that that I talk about. And um, you know if I inspire folks, I'm glad about that. I mean, my aim is to is to do it in a way where there's a little bit of humor in there. And that's, my mom used to say, I used to call her all the time, and she would say, well, better days are coming, or, well, you just got to laugh at it. And it was usually something I didn't want to laugh at when she said it. And then after I looked at it, it's like, oh yeah, I guess she was right. So it took me a while
Yeah.
to understand that. But yeah, I do. And that's, and that's what I talk about.
Right. Now, people will probably get mad at me if I don't ask you, what is IRA? What does it stand for, and what does it do?
IRA, from what I understand, is artificial intelligence, and I forget the god. Ra is it the sun god? I think.
It could be.
But basically, what it is you put the app on your phone, and let's say there's a couple of ways you can use it. Let's say you just have your phone, your iPhone. And you, like I did months ago, it was 2 a.m. and I was doing some work online, and everybody in the house was sleeping. My daughter was in New York. She was sleeping like most normal people are at 2 a.m. And I couldn't, the internet had gone down, and I somehow got booted off our network, and I couldn't remember the password to get back on. For some reason, it had reset to the point, my computer had reset it, and I had to, I couldn't remember it, and I'm like, let me try. I tried Seeing AI, which is another app, which is all based on the phone. It's not a person. So I thought, you know what, let me try IRA. It shouldn't be a long call. I know where I know where the label is. It's right here. I know that the password is in there somewhere. Let me see if I call IRA. So basically I then have on my phone, it uses the camera. It would then, I got this girl named Tracy, and she said, okay, yeah, I see it. And, she tells me what it is. And I quickly type it in as she's, running it off. And I thanked her. It's also very helpful if you're out and about and you need directions. They basically have a couple of screens, one that shows your camera and one that shows a map. So if you're traveling and you're trying to meet somebody or get to an appointment or get to a meeting, they can get you there. They also have them paired with a pair of glasses so you don't have to keep your phone out all the time, and you can communicate that way, and you don't have to hold your phone, because again, as blind person already has one hand on a cane. So I like to keep a hand free, just in case, I kind of keep it out in front of me if I'm in a tight situation, if I'm walking down a city street, just so I'm not running into something or someone. So they'll give you directions. Okay, you're almost there. Oh, watch, here comes a trash can. Watch yourself there, and so forth and so on. So it's a great service that gives you an immediate response, as opposed to Seeing AI and Envision, where you kind of can take a picture and it'll tell you what you're looking at, or you can point that at a printed page or a currency and it'll tell you what it is. For that, to read the mail, that's great. Sometimes, like I said, there's just too much information on a small enough piece of paper that you need to use IRA, where you have a pair of eyes that can look at it and see the word password and go right to it, as opposed to listening to all these things like you would hear with Seeing AI.
Right. Now, there's a recent big news story that Envision is going to be paired with the Google glasses. And I don't know what a pair of Google glasses sells for or what they're going to sell for with Envisions built into them, but you think it's as big a deal as the news reporters would make it out to be?
I really do. And let me tell you how excited I was when I heard about that. Um, I heard, I guess I heard about it. It was right after Podfest.
Yeah.
And it might have been while I was sitting in the airport in Orlando, or maybe it was the next day after I was home. I remember reading about it and I'm thinking, oh my God, I have to try those. And just for your information, they're around $1,500 with IRA, with Envision and the Google Glass themselves. They were going to be at CSUN, and I thought, oh my God, let me see if I can get to CSUN. And meanwhile, I had just gotten off the plane wondering if I had if I had coronavirus, and now I'm ready to jump on a plane again. And it was late, so my wife was. It must have been when I was home because it was late, and my wife was sleeping, and I sent the link to my daughter, who was still awake in New York, and I said, "Would you get on a plane to go to Germany?" Because after CSUN, they weren't going to display them again until some event. What was it called? I think it was called Site City, and it was in someplace in Germany. I don't remember if it was. I think it was Frankfurt, either Frankfurt or Munich. And I thought, would you get on a plane to go see these? She's like, you would get on a plane now? You just got off a plane. You told me that guy was in the airport coughing and coughing, and you don't even know if you might have it now. I said, yeah, you're right. Okay, so I shouldn't go. And I was so excited. And then I started thinking, well, and this is before the travel ban started and everything. Well, at least in the summer, maybe they'll be at the NFB convention, which is in your city this year in Houston.
Yeah.
That maybe they'll be there. Last year I saw eSight, which was in Vegas, but I don't know if you've ever seen those, and I think we might have talked about these in
We
Orlando.
talked about them for a minute, and you said that
They were
that you tried them out, you had them on a short trial period, and after spending a week with them, you basically decided they weren't worth that kind of an investment. But it sounds like you think that the Google glasses with Envision would be worth
yeah, I
this
mean,
kind of an investment.
I would love to try them. The eSight glasses, while they were good for some things, and unfortunately I didn't get to try them at a sporting event, but while they were good for some things to walk around, they were bulky and not very comfortable. They weren't like a normal set of glasses. They're a big, I don't know, almost like a pair of virtual reality glasses, and it just was so much to keep on your face for any kind of length of time that it was just uncomfortable. And they were, even on sale, they were $6,000. But
Wow.
the Google Glass, where they're a lot smaller, almost like a normal pair of glasses. I mean, I just can't wait to try them, and I hope that and again, look, it's like a holy grail to us. Like folks go around looking for a holy grail for to get long life or to get fixed up and all better again or whatever. To see more than we see. I would love to be able to go. I've been to some sporting events in the last few months before everything was shut down, and it was nice being there, but I really couldn't tell what was going on. And it was nice to feel the electricity of the crowd, but I went with a friend to the 76ers game, and I did enjoy sitting with him to talk, but you can't talk. I mean, he kind of said, we'd be talking about something, and then he'd say, oh, so and so just did this, that's why everybody was cheering, or oh, this is what happened. It'd be nice to be able to do both, to be able to kind of get an idea of what's going on. And again, they're not going to help us see better. It's going to say, this is what happened, or this is what you're looking at, or this is how much time is left in the period or quarter or whatever you may be doing. It's just something we just want to do as much as we can. And I just always ask myself, is it worth the cost? And Orcam and eSight, they just weren't. And and these Envision, the Envision app on the Google Glass, I mean, it just sounds, yeah, they are expensive, but it would be so much easier to walk around with wearing something that's like a normal pair of glasses, because I normally wear, when I'm out, I normally wear sunglasses. um, you know to have that on and be able to say, read that or whatever the command may be, and know what sign, what street sign I'm looking at, or to know, what business I'm looking at. Because now, now when I do that, when I'm walking with my wife or my daughter, I am like a 3-year-old. What's that store? What's that store? What's that store? As we're, I know a new store has to be coming along every, usually a storefront is 20 or 24 feet. So I know every 6 or 8 paces, we're probably in front of something new, whether it's a
Yeah.
restaurant or a store. So I always ask. And um, it'd be nice to be able to just, turn my head as I'm walking, tapping my cane, and having my, whatever I'm wearing say, Nike, or, Joe's Cafe, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, yeah. So we're pretty much out of time, but I think it's important we talk a little bit more about this desire to have more vision, whether it's devices or surgery or new clinical trials, new drugs. It sometimes is more like a compulsion, almost an addiction or a disease with some people, as far as that next piece of technology or that next potential surgery or treatment. It's,
I agree. I agree. And I've always said I would risk everything, to see. I would risk everything to be able to put on a baseball glove and go out into the field and field grounders or field fly balls or whatever. My parents, when I was a kid, they would let me do whatever I wanted. And it horrified some of the coaches that I had, where when I played little league, of course, would put me in the outfield because they were afraid I would get hurt. And I had very little chance of seeing the ball in the infield. I had less of a chance in the outfield. And but my parents let me do it when I wanted to. Yeah, go ahead, you can try it. Go ahead. We support you with that. And you know, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's made me always want to try things. And I've always said, and I still, I have a family, and I would still risk anything and everything, to see well enough, or to even drive. There's nothing more frustrating to me than to, I live in a place called Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, and I have a doctor's, I go to my glaucoma specialist is in Media. It's about 5 miles away. If I jumped in the car, if my wife was taking me, it'd be maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes in traffic, and we hit every light on the way.
yeah,
If I want to go on my own, not in an Uber, which I can't justify getting an Uber when I can take public transport for, 1/10 of the cost. Um, and it takes me an hour or an hour and change to get there, because I have to take a bus to a trolley, and then a trolley, into Media. Unfortunately, the trolley lets off right where the right where the office is, so that part is cool. But to be able to get in the car and go somewhere, and to go to the supermarket, and go and do the groceries, or anything I could do, like that would be, would just be outstanding. So it is almost like, again, like I said, it's like a holy grail. And with me, with glaucoma, the issue for some, at least now, so maybe not the whole issue. When I was a kid, it was the whole issue. Your optic nerve is the thing that's the problem. So just imagine, you have your cable wire that's gets pinched in between a door, or it's under the carpet, so the threshold is pinching it, so how your picture gets staticky. It's kind of like your optic nerve when you have glaucoma. Starts on the outside, these pressures spikes kind of chip away at it, and once you lose that part of your optic nerve, you never get that back. It doesn't come back. And so there's always hope of something coming along. And again, I'm to the age I'm to the age now, like anybody else, in their mid 50s. There are a boatload of other things that start happening. You start having, needing. My wife is 51. She's now has to use reading glasses, and she used to be able to read the Burger King menu board from probably the parking lot if we needed to. But now she now she needs stuff like that. So to do something to be able to see again. And I've heard a couple of people. Guy at the NFB said, I'm okay not seeing, and I wouldn't do anything to take a chance to get my sight back. And I don't know. I don't remember if he had sight at the beginning or what his deal was, but just about anybody else that has little or no vision said, yeah, I would, try just about anything to get it back.
You know, I'm similar. I'm similar to that, but kind of a little bit different. I'm one of those people who I'm not exactly sure I would do anything to get my vision back, but I'm willing to try the driverless car. I'm willing to try. I'm willing to try the pilotless helicopter, or the pilotless plane. I'm willing to do things like that.
Okay.
I've talked with my doctor about the Argus implant, which is a combination of a computer chip they put behind your eye and a pair of glasses with cameras on them. And I've talked with him about it, but currently my vision, even though I only have technically light perception, currently my vision is too good to qualify for the Argus program.
Huh. Wow.
So I've considered it. I never really considered the Luxturna trial where they, it's only available to people who have the RPE65 gene anyway, which is a very small subset of retinitis pigmentosa. But I just read the potential side effects of that drug, and I'm like, okay, it could make me see, but it could also make me more blind.
Right.
I'm like, it could cause sepsis. This could kill. This could kill me. And I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
so I'm one of those people. I was actually not disappointed when the test came back and said, no, Mr. Ivy, you don't have the gene. And what was really funny was having to explain to the medical technician that having the gene would have been a good thing. They were like, aren't you? They're like, I'm happy, Mr. Ivy, to tell you that you're negative. And I had a fun time. We had a good laugh, me trying to explain to them. In this case, it would have been a good thing if I were positive, but
right.
Because of all the side effects, I never really considered it. But, speaking of what you're saying about would be willing to do anything, the estimates are that when Luxturna clears clinical trials, because as long as it's in clinical trials, they're doing it for free. But once it clears clinical trials, they're estimating $400,000 to $500,000 per eye.
Oh my gosh.
But we both know there are going to be people who will pay that.
Right.
Who will mortgage houses or have GoFundMe campaigns or, reach out to celebrities or whatever it is they'll do. So, and who knows, some of them may even do some things that are not quite legal to come up with that kind of money.
Right.
But we both know there are people who will do it, but unfortunately, when companies, even companies that are receiving money from nonprofit groups, when they develop this stuff, they want to get their R&D money back. And sometimes, that's the price you're looking at is $500,000 per eye. And I'm like,
right. Wow.
Oh, man. So, well, look, I've really appreciated getting the chance to talk to you again. One of the big pleasures of my life was getting to spend 3 days with you in Orlando. And I would love it if we had some photos or some video of some of the looks we got of me following you around that hotel. I would really especially love to have some video of us going down the escalator because, a lot of people don't think a blind person should be taking an escalator in the first place, or that we can take an escalator. So to see two of us in one place following each other down the escalator, I would love to have some footage of people's response to that. It was a great pleasure, and I really would have been a lot more lost. Well, I think I would have been a lot more lost and had a lot less fun without you. So I appreciate that at PodFest and also you being on my show. I hope people do go to your website, ican'tseeyou.com, and they go check out your podcast and learn more about the how us blind people adapt and live with everyday sorts of things. So if there's one thing you want people to know about you, and then another one thing you want people to know about vision loss and people with visual impairment, what would those one things be?
The thing about vision loss is if you start to notice a difference, don't wait and say, oh, maybe it's just this or it's just that. Go get it checked out because you want to keep it for as long as you can. As far as what people about me, the one thing my dad used to tell me, and I've tried to do this my entire life, he used to say, look, be careful, but don't be afraid. And that's why, that gets me out and about, and that's what makes me want to go and explore and learn. Look, some people, they climb Mount Everest, and in fact, there's a blind guy that climbed Mount Everest. I won't do that because I've got some other health issues that would kill me to get there. But you know getting on a plane in Philadelphia and actually flying to Orlando to make sure that that's where I ended up, that was great. That was an adventure to me, getting through the airport without asking for as little, using as little help as possible. You just go ahead and do it. You have to take action. You have to do it. You can't sit around thinking, man, I'd love to be able to do that, but I'm a little afraid. Don't be afraid. Give it a try. Start with a little step and then work from there. And then soon enough, you'll be doing, everything that Max and I are doing and more, hopefully.
Yeah, I love that. Be careful, but don't be afraid. I love that. And there are things that I agree with you on. I have no interest in climbing Everest or or rafting my way through the Grand Canyon on the Colorado River. Or jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. Those are not on my list. I mean, I was disappointed when I didn't win the ride in the zero gravity opportunity at PodFest. I was very disappointed. And it's funny, the funny things, I don't really like high places. I don't like roller coasters. Yet I was like, man, I want this. And of course I didn't get it, but some of my new friends from Florida said, when this Corona thing is over, come back to Florida. We will make this happen. So then I will have to figure out. Yeah, of course. Then I'll have to figure out how the heck to make Max actually do it. But I have a friend. His name is John Beck, and he's a really dear friend of mine. He says, Max, he said, I think there's something broken in you. And I go, what do you mean you think there's something broken? He said, well, most people I know, they see fear and danger, they run the other direction. He said, you see fear and danger and you run towards it. Like, okay, if that's broken, then I'm broken. But I mean, some of it is just really not seeing the thing as scary as other people see it. So
right.
That helps. But I love before I go on for another half hour, I love that last comment, y'all. Remember, I'm gonna put that up on social media today. Be careful, but don't be afraid. Don't live life afraid. So thank you so much, David, for being on What's Your Excuse. I look forward to seeing you again in person, hopefully this fall at the Independent Podcasters Conference. But who knows, if the Corona lives and things happen where I could go to Florida or Pennsylvania or New York sooner, I will.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you having me today. And if Corona lifts in time, maybe we'll be in Houston for the NFB convention and we can connect there, get out to dinner or something. But again, I really appreciate you having me today, Max.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure, and I'm sure it's going to be the pleasure of everybody that watched.
David Goldstein has left.
Okay, so we had another great conversation today, this time with David Goldstein, somebody who I consider a friend. I mean, we shared a room for 3 days. We ate meals together. We traveled around the hotel together, and he never once got me lost, thank goodness. So I appreciate what he has shared today about how everyone's level of vision loss is different, and that just because somebody has a white cane doesn't mean you should assume that they are totally blind. And when somebody who does have a white cane does something that makes you, where they use what vision they do have, it shouldn't make you think that there's something wrong with this person, that they are trying to take advantage of you in some way, because many people do have functional vision, but they still use the white cane because their vision is not good enough to travel safely. Or their vision level they have, they are not comfortable traveling by themselves without the white cane, even though they may be able, with a device or with holding it up real close to their face, they may still be able to read the newspaper or a list of directions or a recipe or a shopping list, whatever that may be. So just like our friends Stephanie McCoy from Bold Blind Beauty and also Elisa Tobar from a couple weeks back, everybody that has vision loss is different. And some people, it's a matter of not seeing as well at night or losing peripheral vision. With people with diabetes, it can be a little bit of color tint to their vision. So lots of different types of blindness, of vision loss, different levels of visual acuity. Even among people who have almost no vision like I do, there are some people who are much more adventurous than I am when it comes to navigating, and they want to figure out how to navigate a hotel, a arena, an airport with their cane and what vision they have. And then there are people like me who I am perfectly happy finding the next person to come along and following their shoulder and having them lead me sighted guide to where I need to be next. And I'm perfectly fine with the people at the airport putting me in a wheelchair. I don't think that diminishes me at all. In fact, I think it makes me smart because it helps me get to where I'm going quicker with less wear and tear on my body. And there've been a couple of times over the last 2 years where I just really wasn't physically capable of running through an airport. Not that I run. I like to tell people that I don't know about other blind people, but this blind person doesn't run or hide well. So when it rains, I usually get wet. And if I have to be somewhere I've never been before, I leave a lot early just to make sure that I have time to find it myself or to find somebody who can help me find it. So lots of different levels of vision loss, different levels of skills. Some people use their phones and their apps better than others. Some people are more attuned to their surroundings, such as air currents, water sounds, fountains, the pavement, grass, other things like that. They pay more attention to them than I do. So when you meet a blind person, just assume that they are a person, an individual, and try to find out first if they need your help, and then second, what kind of help do they need or what kind of help do they want? And I think that David did a great job of explaining that, of giving his experiences. And of course, you know, what he said about blindness, about people wanting their sight back at all costs. I think that all of us that have lost vision have that in us to a certain extent, some more than others. I think that he explained that it, you know, there are extreme lengths that people will go to, and in some cases that results in people, you know, purchasing technology, thinking that one more piece of gear will get them there. And so I really appreciate him sharing that as well. But I think the most important thing I'll remember is to be cautious, but not be afraid. Be careful, live careful, but not afraid, not fearful. And as he said, as long as you don't live afraid, then you can accomplish lots of things. They may be little things to you, but they may be big things to everybody else. I can only imagine what people thought when they saw two blind guys navigating an escalator. I can only imagine what they thought. Wasn't a big deal to either one of us. At least I know it wasn't a big deal to me, and I'm sure it wasn't to David because he has better skills than I do. So you can, by not living fearful, by living with courage, then you can accomplish big things. And so I appreciate that. Again, it was cool that David said he's been working with Chip Edwards at createmyvoice.com to get his podcast out on the Alexa and Google devices. And if you want to find Chip, you just say, Alexa, play Create My Voice, or you say, Google, talk to Create My Voice, or you can just do the website, like always, createmyvoice.com. And Chip isn't just about getting you on the devices. He's about creating a branding strategy where you claim your invocation name or the name people will use when they want to find your website. So like if you want to say, Google, talk to the blind blogger, or Google, play the What's Your Excuse show. Those are things that you have to claim. And whoever claims them first gets to keep them. So if you don't claim your name and somebody else grabs it, people could by mistake go to that other person's content thinking they're going to something you've created. And they may even be tricked or confused by that other person. And you don't really want that with your brand or your business or your customers. I don't know about you, but to me, I value people who put their trust in me. To me, they're almost like family. So I wouldn't want them to accidentally get sent to somebody else's website or content because I didn't claim my brand name. And that can happen. The other thing that can happen is you may have to pick a name that you don't like, or that doesn't really express who you are, or worse yet, a name that is hard to remember and hard for people to share. So I hope you check out Chip and Pam at Create My Voice. I've also got a new offering on my website. It's called 8 Weeks. And in 8 weeks, I'll help you become the next podcast guest rock star. It's a combination of training you to become a guest. We start by getting clear on who you are, what your story is, and the best way to tell it. Then we'll have some sample interview questions. I'll give you homework. You'll get to practice and answer some of the same questions multiple times so you get better at it. We'll end the first 4 weeks with an interview on my podcast, the What's Your Excuse show. And then in the second 4 weeks, I will get you booked on podcasts so you can actually go out there and start getting your name out, start sharing your story and getting more exposure for your passion. But before and after each interview, we will talk either by Zoom or through email exchanges to remind you of things that you want to be thinking of when you're being interviewed, or to go over things that maybe you could have done better afterwards. And I really think that this is going to be a great program. It's $1,000. I'm willing to look at some installments for people who are really interested in working with me on this. You can find out more at theblindblogger.net/8 weeks, theblindblogger.net, the number 8 weeks. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to get on Zoom or the phone with you and answer questions or discuss it further. So I really appreciate everybody who continues to follow and support the podcast. I couldn't do this without y'all. And so until next time, thank you and take care out there. This is the Blind Blogger, and this has been What's Your Excuse? Too many times we stand aside and let the water slip away. So what we've put off to tomorrow has finally come today. So don't stand upon the shoreline and say you're satisfied. Choose to chance the rapids and dare to dance the tide.